Hi, I'm Chris Gorman from the Center for Educational Innovation at the University of Minnesota. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick primer on how our memory system works, focusing on the limitations that can impact classroom teaching and navigating our online resources. So first, let's talk a little bit about how memory works. There are actually two separate systems underlying our ability to remember information. First, there's long-term memory. This allows us to remember information for longer periods of time, really anything more than a few minutes. So information is stored here as a series of connected information. So how well we remember things an hour, a week, or a year later really depends on how well that information is connected to other things we know. And the capacity of this system is, for all intents and purposes, unlimited. But we have another memory system that's called working memory. And that's the system we use for remembering information for short periods of time. And this underlies our ability to manipulate information in real time and remember things that we've heard just a couple of minutes ago. So for example, if you're trying to calculate 277 plus 34, working memory is what allows you to remember these two values and then imagine that in your head and carry the 1 as you're trying to figure it out. And importantly for this video is that this is the system students are trying to use, or that they are using, to track and make sense of information during class. And the most important thing to know about working memory is that unlike our long-term memory, this system is limited. And you can actually kind of think of it like a cup. It can only hold so much or have so much in it to process at once. And if it fills too fast and gets full, it overflows and things get lost, or they never even go in the cup in the first place. So in many ways, if we teach too much or ask students to work with too much information at one time, it's bound to just be an overflowing cup where there's things that aren't even going in. So the million-dollar question is, how big is the cup? And of course, it depends, but generally about 4. 4 new concepts, 4 big ideas, 4 pieces of information. And this is under the best circumstances, assuming our students are well rested, working in their native language, that they're giving their full attention, that they're not distracted by trying to figure out what it is that you just said 3 minutes ago. And when we go above and beyond this capacity, there's really less learning and more errors in terms of what students are taking away. Now you may have heard about the magic number 7 plus or minus 2 coined by George Miller, but that seems to be a special case for particular types of practiced information, and more generally the limitation is much closer to 4 plus or minus 1. So you'll also notice that I'm being a little bit vague about exactly how much each of these 4 things can be, because there's another interesting feature of working memory called chunking. And so to really understand chunking, we're going to try a little demo. So find the pause button because I'm going to ask you to remember some stuff. So I'm going to show you a list of letters, and without writing anything down, try to remember as many as possible. I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay, pause the video and try to write down as many as you can remember. Very few of you will be able to remember more than 4 or 5 as you check your work on this list. However, I'm going to present the list again in a slightly different format and try to remember the list again. Some of you may be laughing because this is a very trivial task now, because instead of having to remember a whole bunch of letters that don't have anything to do with each other or that feel like they don't have anything to do with each other, I'm just asking you to remember 4 news outlets: CNN, NPR, BBC, and the New York Times. So working memory is an interesting thing. We can only remember a handful of chunks of information, but those chunks can vary in size. The first test is hard because each letter or pair of letters is its own thing and doesn't contain any meaning. In the second test, it's easier because I chunked the letters together with familiar acronyms, and you only have to remember 4 words. And our classes often have this going on too. As experts and the planner of our lecture, we know where we're going, what we're going to focus on, what the major takeaways are, And another way to think about it is the class only has 4 words. But students often see the class just like this left-hand set of letters. It's just a bunch of details. It's too much to remember. There's no way that they can take it in. And this isn't just something that happens in content-oriented lectures, but discussion-oriented classes can leave students wondering what the themes were, and our online content can feel like an endless list of information if the organization isn't clear. So chunking increases the information that we can remember. But of course, one side note about chunking is that it also takes effort, especially for novices who have less sophisticated understandings of our field and less prior knowledge to help guide them in how to put the chunks together. So even in the demo we just did, if I didn't give you a little bit of time, determining what words would make the letters easier to remember would have taken you some time and effort. So what does this mean for our teaching? It means that when we're teaching, we really need to pay attention to the number of concepts we present in a lecture or class period, how many pieces of information we want students to be working with at a given time, and how many things we're throwing at students in our Moodle site and how well those things are organized. We also need to help students see the organization of our content so that they aren't overwhelmed by the sheer amount of details we're providing. And it isn't possible to do this perfectly, but the less effort students spend trying to figure out how to figure out our course, the more effort they can spend learning the skills and content we really care about.